This is John Sadler, and welcome to our video on how to properly collect certificates of insurance from insured subs. Notice the use of the word properly. This is important because if you make a small mistake in this area, you won't likely find out about it until your audit, and by that time it may be too late for you to go back to your sub to either get the mistake corrected or to deduct or withhold the proper amount to recoup your cost. Once you've paid your sub in full, you lose leverage in these situations unless the sub continues to do work for you. The end result is that you could be out of pocket for thousands of dollars in unnecessary and unexpected expenses. So what is a certificate of insurance anyway? It's nothing more than a standard form used by the insurance industry that provides a brief summary of coverage as of the date that the certificate is issued by an insurance agent. It indicates information such as policy type, limits, effective and expiration dates, name of insurance carrier, name of insured, name of insurance agent, signature of authorized insurance agent, and name of certificate holder. Most of the certificates will follow the standard industry format that's on this screenshot. However, some insurance carriers will issue certificates on their own form, but they should include the same information. The certificate holder is the person who requests the certificate. In this case, it would be you, the builder. The certificate of insurance is only a valid representation of coverage as of the date it was issued. There's no guarantee that coverage will continue. For example, the policy could be canceled next week if the sub fails to pay his monthly premium. Also, the insurance carrier or agent that issues the certificate is not legally required to notify the certificate holder if the policy is under a notice of pending cancellation or if it actually cancels. Notice that the language indicates that the issuing company will endeavor to mail 10 days written notice to the certificate holder, but failure to do so will impose no obligation or liability on the insurance carrier or the agent. The key phrase is endeavor to, which does not make it a requirement. It's been my experience that most insurance agencies won't actually mail out the notice of cancellation to the certificate holder. There are two reasons why you want to collect certificates of insurance on your subs. The first is because you want to protect your own loss record under both your workers' comp and general liability. The best way to protect your own loss record is to make sure that all of your subs carry their own policies and present you with a certificate of insurance as evidence. If your sub carries his own policy, his policy will most likely pay the claim in full. The second reason is because if you can't provide the auditor with a valid certificate of insurance that was effective during the dates that the sub performed work for you, you'll be charged on audit for both workers' comp and general liability as if the sub were your employee. At a minimum, the certificate should indicate that the sub carries both work comp and general liability. It's also prudent for the sub to carry sufficient auto insurance on his vehicles. It's possible for the builder to be drawn into the lawsuit if the sub is involved in an at-fault accident while working on behalf of the builder. General liability certificates of insurance should be kept on file for at least the period of the statute of repose in your state. The statute of repose is the deadline for a homeowner to file a lawsuit for property damage such as construction defect against the builder. In such cases, the builder will look to the sub's general liability policy for protection. In South Carolina, the statute of repose period is 8 years if the certificate of occupancy was issued after July 1 of 2005, or 13 years if the certificate of occupancy was issued before this date. Administering the collection of certificates of insurance is a time-consuming but critically important process. It requires a dedicated filing and suspense system. This system can either be manual or automated, or a combination of both. Many of our builders keep a large ring-bound book that's alphabetized by subcontractor name. For each sub, a certificate of insurance is filed for the current year and any prior year. Most builders set a computer suspense for 1 week prior to the expiration of each sub's work comp and general liability policy. At that time, they ask their sub to have their insurance agent send an updated copy of the certificate for the policy renewal. Once the copy is received, it should be carefully reviewed, and if acceptable, it should be placed in the ring-bound book. And of course, a new suspense entry should be set up for the next policy renewal. The suspense can be entered into an automated system such as QuickBooks, which won't allow payment to the sub until an updated certificate has been collected and entered into the system. There's a certain mindset that you need to have when dealing with your subs. First, never ever make full payment to your sub without a currently valid certificate of insurance in your hand. Second, never believe a sub when he tells you that he's insured and you'll soon be getting his certificate of insurance. If you don't have a certificate in hand but need to make payment, go ahead and make a partial payment, but treat the sub as if he is uninsured and deduct or withhold for work comp and general liability. If you do later get a currently valid certificate of insurance, at that time you can reimburse the sub for your deduction. Another important point is that you should always receive the certificate of insurance directly from the sub's insurance agent via mail, fax, or email. It's best to not accept the certificate if the sub directly gives it to you. The reason for this is because it's not uncommon for a sub to commit work comp fraud by giving builders fabricated certificates of insurance that are not valid. Some subs do this so they don't have to spend money on workers' compensation. It's amazing how today's computer software technology easily allows for false documents to be created and altered. Let's take a look at the parts of a sample certificate to review to see how you need to scan it with a critical eye. You may want to have a pen and pad handy so you can take some notes. First, look at the name of the sub under the box titled Insured. The name of the sub must exactly match up with how you cut the check. If it doesn't match up, the auditor may not accept the certificate as valid upon audit. The reason is because some subs have been known to try to pass off a certificate that has been issued to another sub with a similar name. For example, your tile sub might be named Jimmy Brown, but he may borrow a certificate that was issued to his brother's company, Brown Tile Inc., and may try to doctor it to show you as a certificate holder. This is another reason why you should always request that a certificate be sent to you directly from the insurance agent instead of from the sub. Next, take a look at the insurance carrier names in the box entitled Insurers Affording Coverage. If you've never heard of the carrier or if the name is suspicious, you may want to do some investigating. An excellent source is to go to www.ambest.com and sign up for a free account to check out the financial rating of the carrier. As a general rule, the rating of a carrier should be at least A-. However, many popular self-insurance funds are not rated. Another possible red flag would be for an insurance carrier that writes workers' comp that uses the terms employee leasing or PEO in the name. PEO stands for Professional Employer Organization. Many of these are legitimate, but some have offered bogus coverages in the past and have not paid their claims. Next, make sure that the certificate shows evidence of each policy type that you require. At a minimum, you should require both workers' comp and general liability. It's also prudent to require the sub to carry business auto coverage to protect your loss record, but failure to carry auto insurance won't result in your getting charged on audit. Under both the work comp and general liability sections, you want to make sure that the policy effective and expiration dates span the entire length of the time that the sub will be performing work for you. If the sub's policies expire halfway through the job, you'll need to provide the auditor with 2 different certificates of insurance to encompass the entire length of the work. Otherwise, the auditor will consider the sub to be uninsured for part of the job and you'll be charged for this. This is why it's so critical to be disciplined in your suspensing procedures to get updated certificates. Under the work comp section, you want to pay attention to whether the owners are included or excluded under their own policy. It's common practice for the owners of smaller subcontracting companies to exclude themselves in order to save on premiums. In South Carolina, there have been rare cases where such owners were injured on the job and successfully filed for benefits under the builder's work comp policy. Once again, This is a rare occurrence for such a request to be approved by the Work Comp Commission, but you need to be aware that it can happen. For this reason, some builders won't accept a sub certificate when it indicates that the owner is not covered under his own work comp policy. But most builders do accept such certificates at this time since the risks are relatively small. Your auditor will accept these types of certificates where the owners are excluded and won't make a charge. The only risk is that your work comp policy could take a hit on a claim, and this could impact on your loss history, which may result in higher future premiums. However, once again, the risk is small at this time. Under the work comp section, notice that the name of the policy is actually called Workers' Compensation and Employer's Liability. Don't confuse the term Employer's Liability with General Liability. The General Liability section above still needs to be completed to show that General Liability coverage exists. Employer's Liability coverage is a little used and relatively unimportant benefit in most states. The minimum limits are $100,000 each accident, $100,000 disease each employee, and $500,000 disease policy limit. These minimum limits should be acceptable to you. Under the General Liability section, the minimum acceptable each occurrence limit should be $1 million, in my opinion. Many carriers will accept $500,000 as an adequately insured sub. However, I think that you need for the limit to be $1 million, and it won't cost the sub much more to increase his limit from $500,000 to $1 million. Furthermore, the acceptable limit should be spelled out in your subcontractor agreement. The industry standard is for the aggregate limits to be double the each occurrence limit. For example, if the each occurrence limit is $1 million, both aggregates should be $2 million. You need to make sure that the products and completed operations box is not left blank and that it has at least $2 million inserted. Some insurance agents omit coverage for products and completed operations to save premium dollars for the sub, but this is unacceptable, and not only will you not be protected by the sub's policy, but also your auditor will not accept this certificate of insurance, and you'll be charged as if the sub were your employee. Next, you should require that the sub name you as an additional insured under the General Liability policy. This requirement should be inserted in your subcontractor agreement and will give you some additional protection. However, the amount of protection provided to builders by being named as additional insured has been greatly watered down in recent years due to industry changes in the additional insured form. However, additional insured status is still worth asking for. Next, as concerns the automobile liability section, in a perfect world, the sub would be required to show evidence that they carry auto liability limits in the amount of at least $500,000 for all owned, non-owned, and hired autos. This may be a requirement in your subcontractor agreement. However, it may not necessarily be easy for your smaller subs to comply with this requirement, as many will cover their vehicles under a personal auto policy instead of a commercial auto policy. It will be difficult for a sub with a personal auto policy to provide the coverage for non-owned and hired autos. You may find that you need to waive or relax this requirement on a case-by-case basis. There's a good bit of work comp fraud being committed by subcontractors in the form of handing out fabricated certificates of insurance. Also, insurance agents commit fraud from time to time when they collect a premium from their client, but intentionally fail to make the placement with an insurance carrier and pocket the money instead. In addition, untrained staff in an insurance agency can negligently fail to make a carrier placement after collecting premium payments. And finally, some insurance agents may place work comp for their clients with an insurance provider that is not a true workers' comp carrier or that is not approved by the State Department of Insurance or Workers' Comp Commission. You can protect yourself against fraud and other mistakes and problems by carefully reviewing the certificates of insurance that you collect and by being aware of red flags. The first red flag is that the insurance agency name should not be shown in place of an insurance carrier under the section Insurers Affording Coverage. The second red flag is if the insurance carrier names are unfamiliar. You can always check out the carrier names by giving us a call or by going to www.ambest.com or by calling the State Department of Insurance. The third red flag is when the insurance carrier name includes the terms employee leasing or PEO. Many of these companies are legitimate providers of workers' comp, but some have been bogus. Once again, give us a call if these names appear and we can check them out. Next, make sure that the certificate of insurance is signed by an insurance agent. If it's not signed, don't accept it as valid. Next, make sure that the font style and type size are consistent. If they aren't, that is a sign that the certificate may have been doctored by the sub. Of course, you can eliminate this problem if you only accept certificates directly from the insurance agent. Next, if the term binder appears in lieu of a policy number, set a suspense for 30 days to request an updated certificate that includes a policy number. Thanks for viewing this video on how to properly collect certificates of insurance. Please call my office if you have any questions on this topic. Also, be sure to view the video on how to properly deduct from uninsured subs.